We all know Queen Elizabeth II ruled for an incredible 70 years, the longest reign in British history. But not every monarch enjoys decades on the throne. Some rulers barely had time to sit down before their reigns came to a sudden end, whether by force, fate, or political chaos. From monarchs who lasted a few weeks to those whose rule was over in mere days, history is full of leaders who flashed briefly across the royal stage only to vanish just as fast. Blink and you might have missed them. So let's take a look at some of the shortest reigning monarchs in history. Some famous, some forgotten, but all fascinating. In no particular order, at number 1, we have Constantine I of Russia, the emperor who technically ruled without ever really wanting to. When Tsar Alexander I died in November 1825, the Russian crown was supposed to pass to his younger brother, Constantine Pavlovich. And it did, at least on paper. The problem? Constantine had actually secretly renounced his claim to the throne 2 years earlier in order to marry a Polish noblewoman, Joanna Grudzinska, a move frowned upon by the imperial court. But because his abdication wasn't made public, Russia entered a bizarre period of confusion where no one really knew who the Tsar was. For 24 awkward days, Constantine was emperor in name only, before stepping aside for his younger brother, Nicholas I. Oh, and as a bonus consequence, the chaos helped trigger the Decembrist Revolt, a failed uprising by army officers who were just as confused as everyone else. Up next to take the throne, but not for long, are the ill-fated duo of Gordian I and Gordian II. In the chaos of ancient Rome's year of 6 emperors, yep, 6 rulers in 1 year, Gordian I and his son Gordian II were declared co-emperors in a short-lived rebellion against the brutal emperor Maximinus Thrax. It was March 238 AD, and the Roman Senate threw their support behind the father-son team, hoping they'd bring stability to the empire. But their reign lasted just 22 days. Gordian II took up arms to defend their claim at the Battle of Carthage, only to be killed in combat. When word of his son's death reached Gordian I, already in his 80s, he took his own life in grief and defeat. A double tragedy in a single day, both men's reigns ended before they had time to unpack the imperial toga. Rome, as always, moved on quickly. Coming in next, with a reign shorter than a Parisian vacation, is Napoleon Bonaparte, but not as Emperor of France. While Napoleon is best known for reshaping Europe as Emperor of the French, few remember that he also briefly wore the crown of Spain. On May 6, 1808, after forcing both King Charles IV and his son Ferdinand VII to abdicate, Napoleon installed himself as the ruler of Spain during the Peninsular War, but the Spanish weren't exactly thrilled about it, and neither was Napoleon, it seemed. After just 31 days, he handed the throne over to his brother Joseph Bonaparte, who was equally unpopular and earned the nickname Pepe Botella, or Joe the Bottle, due to rumors of heavy drinking. In the end, Napoleon's Spanish reign was more of a power grab on paper than an actual rule, and it sparked years of bloody resistance across the Iberian Peninsula. Following in his father's footsteps, and falling just as fast, is Napoleon II. After famous Napoleon's dramatic fall following the Battle of Waterloo, his 4-year-old son, Napoleon II, was named Emperor of the French on June the 22nd, 1815. But don't picture a coronation with grandeur, the boy never actually ruled. In reality, he spent his entire reign under the care of his mother in Austria, while chaos unfolded back in France. His imperial title was more symbolic than sovereign. Just 16 days later, on July 7th, the French Empire was officially dissolved, and the monarchy was restored under Louis XVIII. Despite holding the title of emperor, Napoleon II never set foot on a throne, earning him one of the shortest and most surreal reigns in European history. Staying in the Napoleonic family tree, up next we have Louis II of Holland. In a short and almost forgotten royal episode, Louis II briefly became King of Holland on July 1st, 1810. After his father, Louis Bonaparte, Napoleon's younger brother, abdicated and fled the country. The 13-year-old Louis inherited the throne in theory, but not for long. Just 13 days later, Napoleon Bonaparte annexed the Kingdom of Holland outright in a bloodless takeover, folding it directly into the French Empire. Louis II was quietly pushed aside, having held a crown for barely 2 weeks. His reign may have lasted only days, but it serves as another reminder that being related to Napoleon didn't always guarantee lasting power. Up next, with a reign that barely lasted longer than a week, is Lady Jane Grey. Known to history as the 9 Days Queen, Lady Jane Grey was thrust onto the English throne in July 1553 by powerful nobles seeking to block the Catholic Mary Tudor from succeeding her half-brother Edward VI. A great-granddaughter of Henry VII, Jane had a distant but legitimate claim, and at just 16, she became queen by Edward's dying wish. But the people in the army rallied behind Mary, who marched on London, deposed Jane, and had her imprisoned in the Tower of London. Just 9 days after being crowned, Lady Jane Grey lost the throne, and months later, her life. She was executed in February 1554, becoming a tragic footnote in the violent power struggles of Tudor England. Next up on the blink, and you might miss it list, is John II of Portugal. Well, the first time anyway. You see, old Johnny Boy technically became King of Portugal on November the 11th, 1477, after his father, King Afonso V, decided he was done with the whole ruling a kingdom thing and retreated to a monastery. But apparently, Afonso got bored of monastic life pretty quickly, because just 4 days later, he emerged from retirement and was like, actually, never mind. John II, being the dutiful son, and probably a little relieved, handed the crown back without fuss. It's basically the 15th century version of saying, just kidding, after making a big announcement. But don't worry, John got a proper go at it a few years later, becoming king again in 1481, this time for real. Up next to take the throne, and lose it faster than most people finish lunch, is Khalid bin Bargash, Sultan of Zanzibar. In August 1896, Khalid bin Bargash allegedly poisoned his cousin, Sultan Hamad, and seized the throne without British approval. A big mistake, considering Zanzibar was effectively under British influence at the time. The Brits, favoring a more cooperative successor, weren't having it. What followed was the Anglo-Zanzibar War. Famously known as the shortest war in recorded history, it lasted a grand total of 38 to 45 minutes. British warships bombarded Khalid's palace, flattened his forces, and forced him to surrender just 2 days later. Let's just say Khalid's reign wasn't so much a chapter in history, more like a footnote with a very loud bang. And say what you want about Miss Britannia, but she really wasn't one to mess with back in her day. Our penultimate entry is the final king of Italy, Umberto II, also known as the May King. When Victor Emmanuel III abdicated on May the 9th, 1946, hoping to save the monarchy's image after its support of Mussolini's fascist regime, his son Umberto II inherited the throne. But the Italian people had other ideas. Just 34 days into his reign, Italy held a referendum and voted to abolish the monarchy altogether, ushering in a republic. Umberto was exiled and spent the rest of his life in Portugal, never returning to Italy. His reign was short, and his timing couldn't have been worse. Talk about inheriting the family business just as it goes on. And finally, closing out our list is Luis II of Portugal. Crown Prince Luis Felipe found himself suddenly thrust onto the throne after his father, King Carlos I, was assassinated during a public outing in Lisbon. But Luis had been wounded in the same attack, and while he briefly became King Luis II, his reign lasted only about 20 minutes before he succumbed to his injuries. It's a grim record, making him the second shortest reigning monarch in history. Portugal would abolish its monarchy just 2 years later, and judging by how things were going, you can hardly blame them. And there you have it, a royal roundup of rulers who barely had time to warm the throne. From tragic assassinations and political power plays to some truly awkward abdications, these short-lived reigns prove that in the world of monarchies, nothing is ever guaranteed, not even the crown. Whether they lasted a few weeks, a few days, or just long enough for someone to say, wait, what just happened? Each of these monarchs left their own odd, fascinating mark on history. Let us know which one surprised you the most, or if there's an even shorter reign we should have included. And hey, be glad your job doesn't come with this kind of turnover rate. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and sub the channel if you're new. Until next time.